tribal engagement and indigenous-led public health disaster research. Before we begin, how many new people do we have that weren't able to attend the first session? You can either raise your hand. If you're new, can you introduce yourself in the chat, your name and affiliation? So before we get started, we wanted to start with the land acknowledgement. We are part of the University of Colorado Boulder, and the University of Colorado Boulder acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. And also the Center for Native American and Indigenous Studies, also known as CNICE, at the University of Colorado Boulder, believes that a meaningful land acknowledgement statement should include information about how you plan to address historical wrongs and inequities. For instance, if you are a non-Indigenous person, you might consider acknowledging the benefits that you have received in exchange for the unjust ways that lands were occupied and acquired with commitments of time, money, or service to organizations that serve Indigenous peoples in your area. CNICE suggests that these contributions be significant, such as giving 1% of your annual salary or dedicating a little more than 1.5 hours per service per week, the equivalent of 1% of 40 hours per week. Okay, so to give a little bit more background on the project for those, we definitely have a goal of bringing together professionals for this project to discuss how we can address Indigenous issues with natural disasters and at the intersection of public health. And last week we talked about what we hope to discuss in these sessions. And this week, I guess before we begin, does anyone have any questions before we go into the themes of this week and do a practice run? Jen, would you like to speak? Okay. So before we begin, we do have slides from last week that introduce the project a little bit more if you need them. And we can share those links in the chat. And also, we're planning on doing like a jam board because we do have a lot of people here, and so we're gonna do a test run with Jamboard before we begin discussing our themes for today. So if we can do this test run the Jamboard, I will drop the link. And yeah, if y'all can click on the link and go to the Jamboard, that'd be great. So the instructions for the Jamboard can also be found in the chat. Sorry. If you haven't used Jamboard before.
Shelby, I think this one isn't accessible to edit. It's view only.
Oh, okay. One moment. Okay, so I changed the setting. Is it working?
Yes, everyone, you can refresh your page and then you should have editing access.
So if you guys can just drop a little sticky note with your name and your affiliation, so we know who is all in attendance.
Looks great, everyone. This is a bit of a refresher from our test run last week. For those of us that are new here, you can find the sticky note function on the left-hand side toolbar. And then once the pop-up box comes up, you can type it and click post. And this is what we're going to be doing in our breakout rooms. So this is a perfect time. If you have some issues, please let us know. You can unmute or type in the chat.
Yeah, definitely let us know if you're uncomfortable with using Jamboard. Has everyone gotten a chance to add their name?
Yes, and like always, in the breakout rooms as well, you can help each other out to fill or to post sticky notes on your group's Jamboard, or if you feel more comfortable doing notes some other way, that's also fine. Just let us know and we'll reach out to you later for notes, but this way you don't feel so pressured about having to create a document or anything. These are completely fine. We're trying to inspire a bit of interactiveness and conversation within your own group. So it looks like people are pretty comfortable with it.
Sounds good. Go back to their little slide. So today's theme. Here's my question. So today's theme is understanding the disaster impacts and capabilities of Indigenous communities. So we really want to know about the past experiences with natural disasters and the impacts to public health and how previous efforts have been navigating these impacts within Indigenous communities. The first question will ask what types of natural disasters that have been experienced in the Indigenous Native American community that you work with are from or are unknown of, I guess, if you haven't ever worked with the Indigenous community directly yet, but aspire to do so. And what were the direct and indirect health impacts that were experienced with these natural disasters? So we kind of want to know what the biggest impacts to what, like if it was infrastructure, where is it homes, hospitals, clinics, local government buildings, or any other buildings that are essential for the community, roads, etc. And the direct impacts can be like healthcare access, damaged homes, damaged hospitals, direct impacts to your mental health. You lose a home or lose anything. It can be a mental impact, mental health impact. Indirect impacts can include like land or natural resources, food insecurity, economic costs that come from these natural disasters. For question two, we want to know how have natural disasters impacted the community's ability to practice traditional culturally significant practices. Um, this question, we wanted to incorporate the Indigenous definition of being healthy, which is being inclusive to physical, mental, and spiritual or cultural health as well. So does anyone have any questions before we let y'all discuss these amongst each other? Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and start doing the breakout rooms. And once you enter your breakout room, we'll drop a link to another Jamboard for your group. And you guys can see the questions and add your answers to Jamboard or your notes. Okay. Um, okay, I created the breakout rooms. Okay. You guys should get an invitation.
Awesome. Shelby, do you want to go into the first three and I'll go into 4, 5, 6 to drop?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Hello.
Hello, Shelby.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going. How are you?
Good. So, we are in breakout rooms right now, and I could put you in a breakout room, um, where the breakout room got a link to a Jamboard, but I can put you in a breakout room that may not have gotten their link yet, but
That's all right. If it's close to the session being over, I don't mind waiting with you as well, but thank you. I
we
see.
just started.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much.
Hey Shelby, quick thing. I think these are also only view, so I think you're gonna have to edit all of them so that people can go in there. Um, and I still haven't gotten to the next rooms. There was one room that I was just in that nobody was Indigenous, and so they kind of didn't feel super comfortable. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move those people into another group. And so we'll have one less breakout room, but in the meantime, if you could fix the edit function, and then go back in and just let them know it's open, I'll finish doing that as well.
Hey, Shelby. I think Megan and I were waiting to get reassigned to a different room.
Okay. Let me see. What room are you guys in? 6?
We were in 4.
4, okay. I put you in room 2. Oh, wait. The rooms are closing.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's back.
I don't know what I did wrong. I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're
I just wait for everyone to come back.
Oh, you ended it, Shelby?
I might have accidentally pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh.
We can redo it again.
I was like, what happened? Okay.
I had a question.
Yeah.
For our group, we haven't worked as much specifically with tribes. So were there any questions, like we weren't sure how to answer those questions because we weren't coming from that perspective. So were there any other suggestions you have for groups that maybe don't have as much experience? And
If you do like have read research about it or have had concerns about what type of natural disasters are in Indigenous communities, you guys could definitely discuss that. And maybe like how you would talk about how things would impact like culturally significant activities and stuff.
And I also wonder, since maybe this was somewhat of a divine intervention, that we all kind of got brought into the big room as opposed to staying in the breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Bit of an accident, but maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is where we're supposed to be and talking as a big group.
Yeah.
And so let's do that. Let's bring up the Jamboard, share the Jamboard with everyone, one link, and then we can talk as a group and really highlight folks that have experience, and the rest of us can listen and contribute if we have some experience as well. And so I think that works out perfectly. So maybe we can give a couple of minutes to review the Jamboard, get ourselves together, and then read the questions, reflect on the questions, and then we can come together to then talk as a big group. I think would be good. So Shelby, you can just share one of the breakout rooms links, and then everyone can take some time to read the questions.
Yeah. So
Y'all can start posting in stuff in the sticky notes as well if you have immediate thoughts, but then we'll also come together just to chat as a full group, I think is a great idea. And thank all of you for being amazing and bringing that up and helping us understand that. And so this is great. And were you able to, yeah, it looks like people are posting. And so it's, everybody's able to edit.
yeah, everyone should be able to edit.
Hi, this is Jumoke Missy. I'm part of the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. I think because of the system that we're on, I cannot see the Jamboard. I believe it's on Google and we use Outlook.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
No worries. I'll share the screen so you can see what other folks are posting, and please feel free to post in the chat as well.
Very much appreciated.
Ooh. This is not the one that I meant to share. This is the actual. This is where we are. All right, so trying to make sure I'm not actually muted. Okay, so the question being, what are types of disasters that have experienced and in the Indigenous or Native American community and tribal areas that you work with or are from, depending on your own experience? And in those cases, what are the direct and indirect health impacts experienced? And so we'll give just a couple of minutes for you to answer in the chat, answer in the Jamboard, and then we'll come together as a group as well. Yes, you can definitely add your names. So once we do the notes afterwards, we can attribute everyone's ideas to who actually said them or the questions to whoever posed them, things like that. So even if it's first name and last initial, something so that we can see who's who.
Over there. Oh, it did go there. Okay.
Nancy, I think you're not muted.
Oh, sorry.
No worries at all. And I thought I posted a sticky and now I don't see it. Because I was going to add my name.
Might have gotten lost behind someone else's too. They
Okay. Yeah. Hmm.
Or if you posted it to when you were in just your particular group Jamboard, it might be on that group page and not this one that we're collectively sharing now.
Yeah, I think it was actually on this one. But I don't know. I'll just rewrite it, no worries.
Andrew, that's a great question. What qualifies as a disaster and what qualifies as higher than normal runoff? That's definitely a good question that we could all talk about, definitely for sure in the amongst everyone, because I am sure people have different answers to that.
Thanks very much for adding that to the board.
Yeah. All right. Shelby, whenever you are filling up, like ready, I think we can maybe start chatting about some of these more, and then maybe we're at the 30-minute mark, so maybe in another 10 or 15 minutes we can transition to question 2.
Okay. So yeah, if anyone is way more experienced and want to share their stories of their concerns of natural disasters, you're more than welcome. I see that wildfire smoke is a big concern, as well as drought and flooding.
It'd be great if some of you that wrote that could share about where you're coming, where your experience is in, where are you located, and tell us about what you've seen there. Would be great. Like I actually can't see names. Not everybody posted their names in these, but anybody that feels comfortable coming off mute.
Hi, I can talk about the Alaska post. My name's Kat Hartwell, and I'm a research coordinator at the University of Washington. And I don't want to talk too much about it because the project's in its very nascent stages, but we have an EPA grant working in partnership with University of Alaska we're looking at wildfire smoke exposure among other climate impacts. And we've done a listening session in February with a large population that included many tribal members and Alaska Natives. And basically stuff we were hearing is how smoke is impacting villages. There's evacuations have to happen of elders and children and those most vulnerable to smoke. And also just like the impacts on subsistence hunting. But like I said, we're in the early stages of this project. And so I don't really want to talk too much more. Probably this time next year, I'll have a lot more to say, but we're doing focus groups over the summer and in the fall. So thanks.
That sounds really interesting. What were some of the experiences like? Were you in the area experiencing the wildfire smoke?
No, I'm based at University of Washington. So like I said, this information is coming from an initial listening session that we did, and we're going to be having deeper, further conversations in the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, even this year with the wildfire smoke in Canada is definitely impacted the Indigenous communities or the First Nations of Canada. In South Dakota, I think we're on our second round of experiencing smoke from Canada already. So it's definitely going to be a continuing issue.
Well, I can share some experiences. So I'm actually a linguist and anthropologist, so my research is not on disasters or anything, but just working with a lot of communities. I've seen a lot of them over the years. Just to give a kind of a survey. So I work in the Fort Belknap Reservation in northern Montana, and there recently they had a very large wildfire. It's mostly grassland, but the southern part of that reservation is forested, and the wildfire burned quite a large portion of the forest pretty severely. So not just a ground level fire, but burning the canopy. And so that was a major area for gathering. So Juneberries is like, there's a lot of names for them, but that's I think one of the most common names. So that's a major berry crop in the summer, and it burned a lot of the areas where there was good Juneberry growth. And then secondarily, it definitely would have affected hunting as well, especially for mule deer in that area. It's called the Little Rocky Mountains. I also work a lot on Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, which is right below the Wind River Mountains. And so that was my question about the flooding. So every June, the rivers rise with the snowmelt. And so there's just some people whose properties are right along the rivers. And any year where there's above average snowmelt, then it floods their property. And you see, and then people have sandbags, but you see, the sandbags in the trailer. And the trailer's just sitting in waist deep water, protected by the sandbags, which some years hold and some years don't. And I've been working in that reservation for 20 years, and you see this every 3 to 4 years, is this flooding which comes through and really can devastate people's property or their cars or whatever. And there hasn't seemed to be any response to that, even though it's a highly predictable, recurring. So it's kind of is it a disaster? I mean, the fact that it occurs every 3 years and is predictable or semi-predictable, makes it seem like it's not necessarily a disaster, but yet it certainly is experienced as one for the people who are in that situation. And then I also work a lot with the Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho in Oklahoma, and in that case, heat waves. have been a major and an increasing problem. And in fact, that's impacted their ceremonies. The Sundance is usually done during the summer. And that's a situation where the dancers don't drink or eat for 3 to 4 days. And if you try to do that and you're getting 110-degree daily temperatures, then it almost makes it impossible to really carry on that ceremony and some other similar ceremonies. So those are just 3 examples from 3 different areas that I've seen some major impacts.
Right. I think in South Dakota, we have the same type of summer ceremonies, so the heat is definitely becoming a factor. But since these ceremonies are like long-lived traditions, I've done some other interviews and I've asked questions if like the heat has ever impacted like these ceremonies, and many of them were like, no, these ceremonies will carry on even with the heat. Like the heat is a part of the process or part of the ceremony, but I'm definitely am growing more concerned about whether people will be able to handle these heat or these days without drinking water and food and being out in the heat from sunup to sundown. Would anyone else? Or go ahead, Melissa.
That brought a question for me that I would like to hear you or anybody else talk about. Then what are the consequences of that? Like, are people getting sick from needing to kind of acclimate, not acclimate, but not wanting to jeopardize the way that traditions are held, but the weather and the climate is just so severe and these disasters just keep happening? What's the impact then to communities trying to uphold these traditions? Are people getting sick? Are we seeing other types of impacts related to health or any other kind of impact that maybe isn't related to health, but that I'm not thinking about right now?
I think it hasn't happened, like the health impacts aren't like being experienced enough yet, because it's kind of still like on the horizon of like really considering the heat, because we do live in these climate zones that we do experience like the extreme hotness, and it's not like anything new to us, but still it does, in the recent years, it does feel a little bit different. The heat and the sun feels way more hotter, and right now I think people are just like dealing with it and taking more time to recover from these ceremonies. But yeah, it's really hard to like not go about traditions and ceremonies the way that we're supposed to follow them.
Well, there was actually someone who died at the Northern Arapaho Sundance a few years ago. So, it can be a very severe impact, but Shelby's right. I mean, these are very, very important things that people want to do. But what I see is kind of subsidiary impacts. And that, in other words, the Sundance or a powwow is a place where many different people of all ages come together and socialize and really build solidarity. But what you're seeing is increasingly older people saying, I just can't be there. I'm going to stay at home. And, you kids and the younger people go out there and camp and stay at the site, but I just can't deal with the heat. And so they're missing out on that degree of inclusivity and social involvement that is so important, so crucial for older people in particular.
Does anybody else have any other experiences or things that they've seen in their research or in their own communities?
I
know.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say really quickly, I know in Southern Oregon that the Klamath tribes had ceremonial sites destroyed by wildfire. So there was definitely a huge loss there, and I'm not sure what the state of that is now. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh. Well, there's impacts. So I work with Native Hawaiian communities, and
that it's impacting their traditional food sources, which then in turn impacts their diets. So I think traditional food sources is critical issue. And then sea level rise is actually in some cases exposing burials because they traditionally buried people in sand dunes. And it's not, the community is not in agreement about whether to just allow that to happen by natural course or whether they should be relocated. So that's causing some issues.
Annie, go ahead.
Hello? Did you say I could go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I had told folks in my breakout session that the picture I have there is of the Arctic Ocean, where I've been working with the emergency managers of the North Slope Borough now since 2007, doing hazard science research and social science research with the Inupiat and their mixed multi-ethnic population. And I got my degree at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. So I'm very familiar with what Nancy just mentioned because I still stay in touch with my colleagues there. So the idea of moving away from the coast, even though there's a huge amount of storm surges now in the summer, we're doing coastal erosion studies, surge, permafrost thaw with thermal sensors. I mean, it's just all melting away. I mean, it's very sad. And right now, one of the bluffs in the community of Utqiagvik that's still extant. I'm an archaeologist by training at Manoa, and the entire bluff for I don't know how many feet in inland is the oldest part of the community. So it's like paleo. And it's falling into the ocean slowly, slumping and thawing, surge impact. So I'm there trying to record all of this, and with community monitors, we've trained community monitors now since 2014 or 15. And then on top of that, food security, we now have harmful algal blooms. Through the National Science Foundation research with colleagues of mine on research cruises, there's a huge seed bed along several places along the slope shoreline, as well as the Bering Strait. And they're already seeing blooms in the Bering Strait, but in the Arctic Ocean, they're starting to pick up evidence from these research cruises. So we've been doing since 2016 water sampling along the near shore area and in the lagoons, but the temperature is just getting in the right zone and it's going to happen. And that they're all subsistence, up there, everything, they eat everything, and it's going to get through the entire food web. I can't even fathom what's going to happen. And we're trying to be very, very cautious right now as far as outreach. We're developing a local advisory committee group that's a mix, of people who have an interest in research and food sovereignty, but are local residents who want to figure out a way forward. Because we have to start recruiting more monitors and start taking more sampling on a regular basis to be sure that there's public safety going on now. Because there are no regulations whatsoever for subsistence, none, unless the community stands it up themselves. So if anybody on this call has had that happen, please let me know, because we are trying to collect comps. You guys live in communities that have harmful algal blooms. It's everywhere. So we'd love to figure out some comps that we can help them with, you know what I mean? How they can self-regulate and keep themselves safe. Does everybody know what HABs are? Harmful algal blooms?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're phytoplankton in the lower end of the food web that all kinds of critters eat and gets passed through. And there can be some toxic ones that can kill you. Kills the animals, the fish, the birds, the people, the terrestrial life, if they're eating it out of a lagoon, drinking water. We're talking, well, hopefully it's not like the pandemic, but if it's not controlled, people are going to start getting real sick. And fast. It works fast. Yeah. It's most of you guys live in places where it happens in your waterways, but it's regulated. You don't eat seafood or stuff that isn't, you know, FDA controlled with all kinds of regulations and policies, but a subsistence community doesn't have that.
Right. Definitely learned about the issues in the Arctic and the coastal tribes with this conference I attended 2 weeks ago called the Raising Voices Conference. And we got the opportunity to hear and see firsthand a movie or a documentary that were made by a man from the Arctic and a woman from the Louisiana coast, the tribes. And yeah, it's definitely heartbreaking to see that they are experiencing these impacts firsthand, and it's not just like something they can it's not easy for them to like just move away from these places because they are their homelands, and that's what their lifestyles are built around, their homelands and fishing and hunting. And it's definitely like losing these resources with like the aquatic life and even just erosion in the land. It is it's like losing your indigenous identity. So you are being forced to adapt to a different lifestyle and move away from these areas that are being eroded and flooded on. And it's hard, it's not easy. That's why we wanted to include like mental health and cultural health in these questions, because these are real issues for Native American people or indigenous people. And it does like take a toll, and it's just like another layer on top of everything that you have to deal with as an indigenous person, of adapting to Western lifestyles and experiencing the systematic oppression and stuff. But yeah, any other thoughts? We're kind of running short on time, so if anyone has any thoughts on question 2, I know we've discussed a lot about like the impacts on traditional foods, and but if anyone else that wants to share their thoughts or stories that they may have heard.
Yeah, if I can just talk about a convening I went to last year where we talked with Native populations in Montana, and it was almost kind of like the opposite effect. So people, non-Native people, were moving into areas where if through Indigenous knowledge of these communities, if you were able to do controlled fires in their traditional practice, it would prevent wildfires from happening in the future or lessen their impact. But people were moving into these areas, or if they were nearby, they would, you know, be very upset if there was controlled fires around them. And so these indigenous populations were unable to do their controlled fires, which in turn created some of the wildfire disaster that happened in Montana in the past couple of years. So it was almost like the opposite, like kind of the flip of the two questions. So their inability to practice due to settler colonialism, their indigenous knowledge to actually mitigate the damage of wildfires actually created and intensified more wildfires, which had damaging health impacts, such as like respiratory issues and loss of land and property due to the destruction of the fire. So I think part of this conversation too is like what us non-Native people are doing that are preventing Indigenous people from practicing their knowledge to maintain the land, and how that is leading to the worst impacts and creating this cycle of damage as well.
Right, those are really great points. Everything comes down to policy and giving trust and honoring Indigenous knowledge in this day and age, because Indigenous way of life is definitely living with our natural resources and not just being separate as if we just lived here without interacting with our natural resources and surroundings. We, as Indigenous people, we always taking care of the land and cultivated everything around us to help us survive and also everything else to survive. Any other thoughts or interests?
So just want to thank all of you for your patience and going with the flow. And Andrew, I think I'm so sorry if I interrupted you. I just saw that you were off mute, but you're welcome to share your thoughts. But quickly, just thank all of you for just your patience again. And definitely lessons learned for the next few sessions. And this session is being recorded and will be posted on, I'll post the website in the link again, where you can find this afterwards. Definitely a lot of incredible and very sad stories posted here, but really things that we do need to know and be aware of and consider for future research and research that we should be funding and resources to. And Andrew, I'll give it to you for a bit if you did want to share a little bit more. I'm sorry if I cut you off.
Oh, no, I just had one quick idea to throw out, which hadn't been mentioned, which is invasive plants or invasive species in general, but especially plants and the way that those displace native food plants and ceremonial plants and things like that. And that also is being exacerbated by fire regimes and by global warming.
Right. And next week, if you guys can join us, we'll be discussing the types of research that could benefit Indigenous communities in climate change and disaster research. But be sure to make sure you're registered to get the link.
Yes, I posted where you can find the recordings on that website as well. You can also find the registration link for next week if you haven't already registered. And Tracy had a great question. We are developing reports after each session. The last one is being edited right now and reviewed, and then we'll be developing the one for today in addition to those recordings, and that will be shared with everyone as well. So it might be a while, but they will be sent out soon.
All right, well, is there any final questions before we go? If not, we are free to go. It was a great session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, I saved the chat.
Okay. That was a little.
That was so scary. Let me, that was great though. It's like, I think it definitely was better doing the